We have a question coming in from Victor W. Victor, one rule for styles and sounds. The dedicated panel, is that the only way for us to access sounds and styles on the event? No. So we thought about that as well too, because again, by having only one set of buttons here on the panel, we believe that, of course, for some people, it might become confusing, right? So you can access the styles like this, for an example. In other words, if you are in the style page, if I touch the style box right there, this is now being used to access my styles, okay? My ballad, my pop, and my dance. If I touch the voice button, now these same buttons are being used to access my voice group as my piano, my brass, and my pad, for an example. But we have a third way to be able to do this, where I can actually have the style access groups on the page directly. Sometimes you want to keep everything on the screen because that way you're not back and forth like a typewriter looking for stuff, right? So if I go right here, for an example, I go to menu, if I go to preference, okay, there we go. And then I want to turn on style to panel. You see that? It turns to style to screen right now. So style to panel is active. When the style to panel is active and get out of menu, it means that when I go to my style selection, on the left side, you can now see my style group. So these buttons that were over here are now represented on the screen. So if I go into my ballad, I'm going to display all my ballad styles. If I go into my pop, I'm going to display my pop styles, Latin, and so on and so forth, okay? So again, let's get a closer look at the screen so you can see what we're seeing over here. If I go into country, I display all of these beautiful styles over there, okay? And of course, I can just make my selection by touching on the screen. So now your style access is being used by touching any of these style groups on the screen rather than depending on this. So now what you can do is this becomes your dedicated buttons for your styles, and you leave these alone for your voice selection. So you have two separate areas dedicated for you to make your selection, as you would find on some other arranger products out there. So again, I'm always trying to emphasize on the fact that this is a professional programmable arranger keyboard. So you can't just stick to what the factory, what we do is we present you the keyboard the way we see best fit. But there may be people out there, Joe, Thomas, and Susan, who feel like the arranger should be a particular way for the way that they're used to performing on an arranger keyboard. And the power of the event is it gives you that capability to be able to program that particular arrangement on the event as well. Moving on, we're down to registrations. Peter T, registrations can these only be selected by wheel? If I have 1,000 registrations, the wheel becomes cumbersome. You can select registrations by using the wheel. That's one method. But of course, if you have 1,000 registrations, you're going to be there spinning the wheel over and over and over again to get to a particular registration. And that is why KETRON have incorporated two different kinds of methods or different ways to be able to search for registration. The first one is, of course, the wheel, okay, which everyone knows about. But the second one also is you can search for them either by title, by the name, alphabetical search, or by number, which is numeric search, which is very, very simple, okay? So once I go into my registration screen, I'm going to go back to my screen right now. I touch the registration button. These are your current registrations that are displayed in the current bank. You have 4 banks of registrations. Each of those can hold 1,024 registrations, right? So, right, you can use the wheel to search, okay? But if you notice, as you create registrations, they're all assigned a number, okay? Every registration is assigned a number in there, which means that I can use that number to recall the registration very, very quickly. Right here on the right-hand side, you see where it says search. If I touch search by number, I can simply just hit that and enter the number that I want to load. If I want to load number 3, for an example, I just enter 03 and enter. And right there, country ballad is loaded. You see that? Let me zoom into the screen. So I can quickly load a registration by number 03, 05, number 247, number 1024, just by using the bottom right hand section of the screen that says search. I can also search alphabetically. If I go and touch alpha right there, you see alpha is on. Now it's giving me the keypad with the ABC. So if I'm looking for a registration that is called Easy Lounge, as we see there on number 5, I just simply type E. So I come to the number 2, and I hit it twice until it says E. Easy is E. Okay, I touched A, right? And I want to zoom out so you can see exactly what I'm doing on the screen. E, A. And sometimes all you gotta do is just type in the first few letters and hit enter. And it's gonna pull up everything that has the EA right there, okay? And then of course you hit that and you load in your Easy Lounge registration. So using this registration is very powerful. Remember, each of the banks, you have 4 banks in there, each of them have 1,024. You have 1,024 in bank 1, 1,024 bank 2, 3, and 4. You can create up to 1,024 registrations, right? So that becomes very, very cumbersome. So this is a very good question indeed. You know, how do you search through? Yes, you have the wheel, but again, this is not the only way that you can search for registrations. You can also search for them numerically and alphabetically. Now, why did we put numeric in there? There are some of you out there who are used to the old way of doing things. You have like your cheat sheets. You have your song book, for an example. And within your song book, what you're doing is you have a song, let's say Slip Sliding Away, or you have another song, Julie Andrews, or you know, different songs that you have. And what you do is you create a setting for that particular song, and on that song book, on that cheat sheet, you just simply write the number, right? So let's say you wanted to write the number for registration, I Will Always Love You. On your cheat sheet, you put number 72, because on your keyboard, registration number 72 is I Will Always Love You. So you put a number in there. Now when you're performing at the gig, all you gotta do is put in 072 or 72, enter, and it calls it up right there. So it's barely, you can actually recall a registration in under a second, okay? And that's, again, for professionals. Those of you who are out there performing, you got people on the dance floor, you wanna go from song to song real quick, you can use a numeric search value on that to recall a registration. Or if you don't remember what the number is, but you know that it was called I Will Always Love You, you can use the alphabetical search and just type I will, and it's going to pull up all the songs that begin with I will, and you select it. Again, 2 touches. So no, dismiss that myth or the fact that everything has to be done with the will. That is not true, okay? The capability to be able to freeze registration parts, right? We don't have a freeze on the event. No, that's because the event is a lot smarter. So what we do have is a registration menu where you can determine what the registration recalls, right? And I think that's where there's some people may not understand some of the functionality of some of these features. So when you go into menu, I'm going to go there real quick. You see there's an icon called registration setup, regist setup right there. And you touch that registration setup. Now let me explain what this is. On the left side are your categories, and on the right side are the individual items within the categories that are selected. So right now we have the general category, which is yellow, which is on, and it tells you what are the things that the registration will recall. Okay, so in this case, the transpose value will be recalled, and the slider locations where your sliders are shall be recalled when you recall a registration. If you do not want the registration to recall the slider and you want it to maintain the value of the sliders as they are right now on the panel, you would turn the slider function off. Okay, so this is a very good example right here. This means that when you try to recall a registration, it will ignore wherever the slider values were, the digital value of the volumes. That shall be ignored. What will take precedence will be the location of the slider right now. So, which means that if your sliders are all the way down on 0, okay, and you made a registration where they were all the way up, if you recall that registration with the sliders down, you're not going to hear anything because the registration is not going to recall the value of the sliders when they were saved. It's going to take upon the current location of your sliders. Now, most people like this particular function like this because they want to be able to visually see their volumes as they're performing live. For other people, they don't want it this way because every registration may have a different volume. Some may have, the drums might be a little bit softer in one registration or one song setting, and in a particular rock and roll setting, the drums might be louder, and they want the machine to recall the volume levels the way they were saved during creation. In this case, you want the slider to be on, okay? Let's go to another category. If I go to the style category, now my style is selected here. On the right-hand side, it's telling me what are the characteristics, what are the features of the style that will be recalled when I recall a registration. When they're yellow, it means yes, it will be recalled. If it's not yellow, it means no, that will not be recalled. So in this example right now, you notice that everything here shall be recalled. If I go from one registration to another, it's going to recall these values. But let's just say, for an example, that I want to keep my drums consistent, regardless of how they were saved during the registration. I do not want to recall the drum levels as they were stored. I want them to remain consistent based on the drum selection here on my panel. Then I would turn off the drums, because I don't want the drum setting to be recalled, the digital value of the drum setting to be recalled, okay? And this is again true for all of these. Voices, same thing. When I recall my voices, do I want the right-hand voice to be recalled or not? Maybe when you go from registration to registration, you want to maintain the same voice all night long. You don't want to have the registration change the voice the way it was saved. In that case, I would turn off that voice, okay? So these are all the settings. Play modes, again, what do you want the registration to recall? Whatever you want it to recall, you check and make sure it's yellow. Whatever you don't want it to recall, you uncheck and make sure it is white, okay? When you're done with this particular thing, page, you then press the save button and you now save your registration setup, so that from here on forward, when you now recall your registrations, you've programmed the machine to either recall the values as they were done when they were created, or to ignore them and have the recall to be based upon your live setting of your keyboard. Again, that's what professionals want, that's what professionals ask for, and that's what we gave to professional keyboard players. Now, amateurs might not find this funny, right? Because again, it seems like it might be too complicated, but in reality, as a professional keyboard, very few people buy the keyboard and use it the way it was out of the box, right? You always try to customize it for your purposes. Most amateur players would simply just want to buy the keyboard and just start playing with whatever is there. And that can also be the case with Event. You can have that capability, but you're not going to be that satisfied with it because it doesn't meet your needs. You have to be able to program and customize some of these settings based on your needs as an amateur player. Next question now, power button. Yeah, somebody said they watched a video and somebody claimed that the power button does cut your finger. I'm almost tempted not to answer that question, because if that were the case right now, KETRON would be in a lot of lawsuits. We've shipped many arranger keyboards, especially in Europe, and a lot of these are now heading to the United States as well. So just imagine that if it was true that the power button does cut your finger, you know, would we be selling events? Would we be out of business? But no, and there's a reason for why the power button was designed the way it was. And let me try to explain that again. In our other older arranger keyboards, the power button was located at the back. Of course, it's from an engineering perspective. The power button being at the back is very close to the transformers, and so less cables, making it cheaper, and you can just hit there. But what happened was, sometimes when people transport the keyboards, they would press that button or they would break the button, for an example. So this time what we decided to do was have the power button on the right hand side over here. And let me see if I can turn this camera real quick so you can see that button right there, okay? So that's where the power button is located right now. And there's a reason why it's a deeper press. This is supposed to be done to avoid accidental on and off. So imagine if you're playing at a performance and you have a couple of people who are maybe drunk and they're coming in there and they're trying to toy around with this. By just simply touching the button like this, there is no way that the button is going to be turned off accidentally. You have to physically actually go in and press that button. And no, the edges are not sharp and it's not going to cut you. So again, sometimes too, you know, we don't control what people put on social media, but I think that, you know, a lot of people, I want to believe, are smart enough to decipher between what is true and what is a myth. So no, the power button is not going to cut your finger. I don't think by law we could design such a feature, otherwise we would be out of business. So I hope that answers that question. Digital sliders and knobs, being able to store and not to store values. I think I already answered that when I dealt with the registration, right? Being able to recall, and how you can do this in one of two ways. For example, being able to recall the value of the sliders when they were saved, when they were saved as registration, or ignore that altogether and recall it based on the location of the sliders as they are right now. And you can choose either of those two routes. Each of them will benefit you best in the way you see fit.